From meeting room wisdom to bestseller lists, change makers to chapter ones, this is where expertise meets legacy. You're tuning into the Authors on Mission podcast, where industry giants become literacy legends. In every episode, we talk with authors who turn their brilliance into books that transform lives. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authors on Mission. Welcome to your authorship experience. Welcome, everybody. Today's guest has an amazing story to tell. From starting his first company at age 21 with 8 employees to building and operating more than 13 businesses across diverse industries, Marty Park has lived the entrepreneurial journey he now helps others navigate. As an award-winning business coach, international speaker, and author of the Amazon bestseller Tiger by the Tail, Park brings a unique perspective to the entrepreneurial landscape. His philosophy of combining business growth with personal development has earned him a recognition as Business Coach of the Year for both Canada and North America. Congratulations. And today we're going to sit down with Marty and explore a little bit about his life and his experiences and how it all relates to writing and books. So, Marty, welcome to Authors on Mission podcast.
Danielle, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Always. We're so excited to have you today. And, you know, for all of our listeners, maybe you're listening on a Monday right now. It's Monday for us. And Marty was just telling me about, you know what, he had a long day at work, as we always do sometimes. But yet he's here with us today on this podcast to talk about, you know, everything that brought him to where he is today. And I mean, what better way to do it than right after a long day of enjoying the fruits of your labors, right?
Enjoying entrepreneurship, exactly.
Right. It never does end, but that's kind of the benefit of it, right? It's what you want to do. Sometimes it's nice to relax. Sometimes it's good to be busy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm blessed with busyness.
Yeah. So I mean, let's get the ball rolling a little bit. I mean, I guess the most, you know, insane thing that a lot of people probably ask you is that you were able to, you know, start your whole business and everything at age 21. Now, right. I mean, I know that I'm only like 29 right now, but at 21, I was nowhere near doing what you did. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like, what led you to that path? Probably something you have right in your books, but for any listeners who might not know, give us a little
Sure. So the headline of starting a business at 21 sounds really awesome. So I'll give you a little bit of behind the scenes that maybe makes it a little bit more realistic. But there was part of it came about from being at a big college, big university, where I really started to feel like a bit of a number. I really started to feel like everything was based on, what's your student ID? And I was like, well, my name is Lassie. Yeah, we don't care about your name. What's your student ID? And I started to be, you know, in some of those big lectures and stuff, there'd be 200 people, 300 people. And I was like, I'm really just an anonymous face here in the crowd. And I got involved in the Entrepreneurs Club in the business group or in the business faculty. And it was hanging around with other entrepreneurs that really got me thinking about starting a business. And one of the guys who became my business partner, Greg, came to me and said, hey, listen, you and me, we got to start a software company. And in fairness, he'd been reading a magazine and heard all about telephony software, which is what most people think of as voicemail technology. But at the time was like the latest, greatest cutting edge stuff. And we were really, and I've used this phrase, you mentioned it in our sort of pre-work, I was blissfully ignorant. I mean, both of us were so enthusiastic and we thought, man, we are going to launch this company. We'll be retired in 6 months. This will be unbelievable. And so we did start the company. But in 6 months, we really hadn't paid ourselves. Our software wasn't at a point where we were able to release it. I'd maxed my credit cards. Like most entrepreneurs, I got into it and was like, wow, this is way more complicated and taking longer than I thought. And so we at some point went to Greg's dad and said, listen, we're getting a line of credit for the business, but they need to put a property against it. And as sort of collateral, Greg and I didn't own a house yet. So Greg's dad put his house up for us. And it was at that point we went from we were really playing business up until that point. And then we had to start really getting serious about how to do business. And that was a real turning point for us. So we did manage to make that work. We added staff. We spun out an audio production company out of our software business. And at a pretty early age, by the time I was sort of 24, I think we had as many as 14 employees. I had some really old people as employees. They're like 40. Right now, of course, being over 40, I'm like, oh, I guess that wasn't quite as old as I thought. But at 21 and 22 and 23, I got really a lot of entrepreneur lessons that some people don't get until decades later. We got them really, really early. And so by the time it sort of set the course, having all these different sales lessons, how to finance things lessons, and development lessons, and HR people lessons, that by the time I was a little older, like by the time I was 30, it was into my third business, and by then was sort of a seasoned entrepreneur. But that's a little bit more about how we sort of got started at 21.
Congrats on that. I mean, so many people these days, they want to do what you've done, but they just never took the initiative. I mean, I would have loved to also start my own business at college, but I feel like, we're in college, we're having fun, we're talking to our friends, we're not starting businesses. So, I mean, like, that's just something that's incredible about you took the initiative. You went ahead and you just did it. And you were, the boss of people that were twice your age. So
Yeah.
that must have just been, something to be very proud of. And, it's
It
funny
wasn't at the time, but I mean,
no.
looking back now and through my years, yes. But at the time, if you're 21 and you're doing what you're doing, I guess we were clear that we thought we were sort of special. Like, we knew other people were staying with college, they were going to finish their degree and get all that. But we really were almost in a bit of a race where we thought by the time they graduate, we'll probably be retired. Yeah. And then it didn't quite work out that way, but we were certainly hungry. And I think, actually, I hadn't thought about this in a really long time, but as part of the Entrepreneurs Club, we had a conference, and there was a really, at the time, rather famous entrepreneur who was our keynote speaker. And he really pushed the idea. He said most people get to be 40 before they start a business. And he said by then they often are married and have kids and a mortgage. He said, like, do it now. And he spoke to the audience of students, and he said, like, you're young, you don't have a mortgage, you can take risk. Now is the time. And that, I think, that message was a huge catalyst for Greg and I jumping into this business.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I actually skimmed through your book a little bit, what I was able to find and kind of go through it. One of the things you mentioned is the importance of, sales is kind of where the rubber hits the road. So, I mean, my interpretation of that is kind of just like, take it and you go with it and you don't stop. Is that sort of what you meant by when you said rubber meets the road? Or perhaps I'm off track a little bit.
So, no, actually, there's multiple ways I mean it. I run into business owners for the years where oftentimes, there's somebody who's really good at product development, and they just trying to keep reworking the product development. They're trying to make the perfect mousetrap, but they haven't sold anything. So they're in a perpetual state of research and development. And so they are also companies where, they could be heavy on, if it's not R&D, somebody I know who's always trying to inventory. We got to make sure we got enough inventory, because if a big order comes through, we'd have to make sure, and he's managing inventory. And what I found is that really all of the work we did in our first business and all of my subsequent businesses, nothing really happens until you sell something, right? Everything else is preparation. And the second you have a sale, it's like you've got to spring into action, where it's like, well, now we've got to deliver. Well, now we've got to get into operations. Well, now we've got to invoice. We've got to figure out how to administer this, all these other components of the business. And sometimes people, entrepreneurs, get caught up with, well, what happens if I sell it? And I've always said, well, all you've got to worry about, your first focus every day out of bed is, what can we sell today? Because soon as sales start to happen, rubber meets the road for every other aspect of the business. But you don't really need to worry about customer service if you haven't sold anything. Invoicing, not important until you sell something. And so there's so many components that everything happens as a result of a sales transaction. And so that's where I'm like, I think it should be a huge focus for every entrepreneur. And it really is where the rubber meets the road, of everything else happens following that. And so that, to me, has always been one of the keys to my success, but also a key to any good entrepreneur, is just making sure that you've got a one eye always focused on selling.
Right. Okay. And I get that. It makes a lot of sense that, nothing else is going to happen unless you're actually getting clients, making sales, having things happen. Otherwise, you're just kind of sitting at the computer, what's going to happen. So I get that. And so I'm assuming that in your book, you offer a lot of strategies to kind of prepare people for, that moment when things start really taking off, to get prepared. Is that kind of what you did?
Yeah. So what interesting, well, the book was geared towards, I think any entrepreneur can make use of it, whether you're a one-man, one-woman business or whether you've got staff already. One of the things I noticed that there was a lot of books in the market about how to start a business. And looking at that, I started to talk to business owners who were already running a business, whether they were in it for a year or in it for 5 years. And sometimes what really actually the book started as Post-it notes, where somebody would say, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. Geez. And, I thought, oh gosh, I should write that down. And oftentimes people were also saying, well, how come my accountant never told me that about finances? Or, well, I had a sales manager and he's never mentioned that. And so there seemed to be this gap of the resources people had. And I thought, nobody ever writes a book for the person that's running a business and feeling pretty chaotic, thinking, I must be doing something wrong. And I really wanted to have the underlying messages. It's supposed to be chaotic. It's a wild roller coaster ride. And if you're in that, you're probably doing everything right. But here's, the subtitle of my book is 99 Secrets to Tame and Master Your Business. And it was really 99 secrets. It didn't start off as 99. It was good marketing where I was at 76. I thought, I bet I get 99. But it was just 99 ideas or 99 lessons that I'd had that I thought all these would be really helpful for somebody who's running a business, that they're probably not getting from their lawyer or their accountant or anybody else who's in their sphere who's talking about, like, here's a practical way to manage a business or a practical way to run this aspect of the business. And so I tried to make it very practical and very sort of rubber meets the road with every aspect of the business, whether it was the HR and the people side or the finance or marketing, all of those things.
Yeah, and I could see how, it must have taken like a lot of planning to take everything that's up here in your mind and figure out, okay, you said you had 78 to start with, 78 tips?
Yeah, 76, I think.
76?
Yeah.
Okay, so not only planning out 76 of them, but somehow finding a way to add on even more until you got to 99. I mean, that must have been a challenge. What was your thought process like for that?
Yeah.
Did you start brainstorming one day?
So as I mentioned, it started with just a couple of Post-it notes.
Then
I literally had the Post-it notes one day get to the point where I was like, geez, there's quite a few here. And I bet there was, I don't know, maybe there was 25. But I sort of had that inspiration at that point, like, I wonder if I could write an ebook, or I wonder what I could produce. And so it came to me, I thought, boy, I bet there's something here. And I played with what I call sort of the skeleton of it. Like, what would be the theme between these Post-it notes? Like, what are some of the key messages? And so I really got to a place of the idea of the book. Like, I want short chapters because entrepreneurs don't have the ability to sit for hours and read. But if they could read a chapter on the airplane, they could read a chapter, I don't know, in the bathroom, they could read a chapter at their desk at lunch, right? And it was like, hey, you could read this in 5 minutes, but it might be a great idea in the leadership section or in the marketing section that might help you in this week, today, managing that aspect of your business. That would be really valuable. And so that sort of like, how would they use it, informed some of the writing. And then sort of the skeleton of like, okay, these ideas that I have down, what aspect of business do they touch on? And it became fairly natural for me to go like, oh, there's buckets here that they're falling into. And then I started writing each individual of the ones I had, and I started then sort of adding to the list and also writing. And that's how it sort of came about. But once I knew that, okay, I've got sort of a title here and I know what the structure is, then writing the individual chapters, I jumped around all over just based on what inspired me each of the writing sessions I had.
Understood. Okay, so to clarify then, pretty much you wrote this all on your own. So no help of like ghostwriter, editors. It was.
No, I had a fantastic editor.
Okay.
But no, actually, very unusual because I had looked into self-publishing. I looked at traditional publishing, and I was shocked at how many people said, "Oh, you mean you already have a manuscript?" And I said, "Yeah, I've got a manuscript. Right now it's sitting at." The final book is 398 pages. Now they're short chapters and short pages, but it's pretty thick. And a lot of them were like, I actually eliminated myself from some of the publishers. They were like, oh, no, we're looking to work with authors who want to have a ghostwriter and we'll control the process. And I was like, oh, well, I've already got a manuscript. I mean, I can send it over to you if you want.
Why would you start again?
Right. And it was sort of, I was actually shocked to learn a little bit about the publishing space and how that went about. But yeah, I did do all of the writing, the initial writing myself. And then I mentioned I had an editor out of Pittsburgh who was just really terrific. I mean, he understood my voice. He didn't necessarily change all the writing, but he challenged me with every single chapter. Is this the key idea? Is this what you're trying to get across? How else could you develop this story more? It just helped me reflect back on my own writing, and it was absolutely invaluable. I paid him just on an hourly basis as an editor. And I spent way more on editing than I thought. But when I would get things back, sort of as we went through it, with a second edit or man, I finally get, the chapters, and they felt very tight and concise and exactly what I wanted to say. And the editing part was really rewarding. I mean, as rewarding for me as the initial writing.
I'm really glad to hear you did have a team. I want to let you know, though, I mean, whatever publishers are saying that, oh no, we only start, from scratch. I mean, Authors on Mission, for example, we kind of take the manuscript and wherever you are currently and kind of work with you based on whatever your needs are. I mean, I have a lot of clients who come to me with just like, they have their finished manuscript or a couple chapters or whatever it is, and we like to kind of frame our projects based on their clients' needs. So we have just ghostwriting services. We call it angel writing, actually, here at Authors on Mission. Why, angels. But we have editing services, marketing services, publishing services, kind of like pick and choose what you need at a buffet. So
and I always thought that a la carte method, just like you offer, makes so much more sense, because at least if I was just starting out, I might need the guidance. But for me, so I have a business coach, and as a coach, I've got a coach, and he had said, like, what are you writing a book for? This is the dumbest idea ever. He goes, if you think you're getting rich writing a book, like, don't waste. And I really said, no, I really feel a calling or a yearning to do that. And I said, I'm really only concerned that if one person reads it and says, your book really helped me run my business or change my approach or helped with my mindset as an entrepreneur, then I was like, it would all be worthwhile. And so as an outsider, even some of my trusted advisors were like, this is the dumbest idea. This is crazy. So finding some support in that, somebody like yourself or somebody who can be like, it doesn't matter if you're 3 chapters in or you've got 20 chapters or you just have an outline, like we can help bring that to fruition. I think that's the most valuable help, is helping that author along their journey. And it doesn't necessarily need to be, one size fits all.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really just wherever you're at in your stage. I mean, for somebody as busy as you are, the fact that you've had the time to write it is just incredible. That's one whole...
I have to stop you because, funny enough, I've had a lot of people say, well, when did you write this? So I started having children. So I worked on the book from its very first, the Post-it notes. It had probably been about 2.5 years. And then I was trying to do it exactly like I'll write a little bit here and there. And I took off a couple times to our place in Montana and would do 2 or 3 days as a writing break. And that was really, really productive. But then I started having kids. And of course, anybody knows who's got small babies, you don't sleep for years. But I really got frustrated. I had said to my wife, I have to get back to the book. And so I realized I was trying to find time in a 40-hour work week. And I had to eliminate this idea of it's going to just fit in my Monday to Friday. And so what I started doing was waking up at about 3:30 on Sunday mornings. And I would start writing by about 4, have some coffee. And I would write from 4 until 8, maybe 9. And then by then, the rest of the family was up, the babies were up, and I was like, okay, I could jump back in. But all of a sudden, I created a time slot, and people said, you must have been exhausted. And I said, well, one night of a little bit of sleep, I go to bed early on Saturday night, but get up super early. I felt more inspired and energized getting up early and doing the writing than I did. The frustration was sucking the energy out of me by not doing it. And so once I got rolling with this routine of writing early Sunday mornings and doing a couple more writing retreats, man, I just poured through the content and then had it to, in its manuscript form in about 12 months. So that was a real secret. Like people say, well, where did you find the time? I literally had to make the time out of my normal schedule. But it turned out to be a great secret for me in getting it written.
I love that you were able to share that, secret with everybody, because our listeners are all people just like you who, they're busy, families, it's Monday and they're like, it's 6 p.m. and what am I going to do now? I don't want to sit down and write, but it's all about scheduling out that time of day that works for you. I actually wrote a whole blog post about it not too long ago, but because, it's about finding the time that works for you. A lot of my clients, they like to voice message me whenever they have a moment, just like, oh, hey, there's this idea for chapter 2. And then, even if it's when they're in traffic or on, on the elliptical, even sometimes it's like, you got to find what works for you. And for you, it was those 4 a.m. writing sessions, watching the sunrise.
It was so crazy that I would have friends who would be they'd be staying up late on Friday night, maybe having drinks, maybe playing late night hockey, just watching Netflix. And they'd wake up and be like, oh, I'm exhausted. I stayed up too late. And they were more than willing to sort of passively get really tired doing that. But the idea that I was getting up early and I might be tired to get on something that I was really passionate about made no sense to a lot of my friends. And I thought it was sort of ironic, like, okay, so you're just as tired as me, except you got nothing but Netflix done. And I managed to get 2 more chapters in the book done. And so it's just a different understanding that those are still my friends and people I care about, but that maybe the path I was trying to be on as an author was a little different than theirs. And so certainly when I was doing it, lots of people who were like, you're crazy. And I was like, it's not that crazy. I mean, we all get up for work on Monday to Friday, so I just happen to do it a little earlier one day of the week. And I couldn't do that every day, but the one day a week, it was really pretty manageable.
Yeah, I mean, again, you have to find the time that works for you. If it's even one day a week, it's more than what other people are doing. And I mean, I've had my fair share of time where I too was somebody who would come home after work and then just watch Netflix with my roommate, right?
Don't get me wrong, I'm not down on Netflix.
No,
but
it's a great way to relax. You know, I mean, you got to check out the newest season of Squid Game that's coming out. But there's also the benefit of just like now I'm able to have amazing podcast conversations with people just like you. I'm angel writing, I'm editing, I'm, doing everything, and it's much more rewarding. And so I can see exactly how, as for you, when you were able to finally get that book out there, and now you have that business card in a book, like, here's my book, it's right here, all the facts, credibility, all that packaged right up for you. So it was worth it.
Exactly. I totally agree with you.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, this book didn't come out too recently, right? It's been a couple of years. Am I correct in saying that?
It would have launched 3 years ago.
3 years ago. Okay. Have you seen a big difference, in the business side of things since it came out? Any impact?
It has been, I think, almost like you said, like you've got a business card that's a book. I will say that there's been a number of people who have phoned and talked about working with me from a coaching standpoint or business strategy, or just saying, I don't know how you can help me, and one of them, and when they've said, like, oh, I've read your book. I mean, one guy, I had a gentleman from, I can't remember where he's from, it might have been Vancouver, but he had said, yeah, no, I've read your book. I've just listened to the audio. So, like, how can we work together? What do we do? And it eliminated the book really gave such credibility and eliminated some of the need to have to sell. Right? And so that's what I found is, from a credibility perspective, it's been awesome. Sold quite a few of them, right? They consistently have sold all over North America. I think as a marketing piece, it's been awesome. I didn't realize that having a book is like you launch it. First week, we were Amazon bestseller. We were like, woohoo, doing a dance. And then the next week, I was like, oh, right, we got to keep marketing this thing. Okay, it's like a whole nother business.
It's another child.
Right, yeah, it totally is. But certainly, I think that's been the big thing, is being able to say, hey, I'm going to send you my book and share it, that it is instant credibility. When people have read it, they've sort of said, like, man, this is exactly what we're looking for. So it has made selling, or again, creating credibility, just pretty instantaneous. So it's a real extension that way. And I like that. I think that's been one of the biggest benefits.
Yeah, I mean, to all of our listeners right there today, you're looking for the same thing, I'm sure, in your own business life. I mean, what better thing for all aspects of your career than to have a book with your name on it and it's sitting there on the shelf? I always like to make this joke. I'm like, if you were trying to secure a client, right? And, it's against you and then somebody else, but then they happen to have read your book, who are they going to go with, right? So there's always that kind of analogy I like to make.
I have a great friend, and I should share this because I think it's relevant to a lot of listeners who are thinking about this. He has innovated to the point where he oftentimes has sort of an introductory call with people, and they will be looking at multiple consultants in his space. And he would finish up the first call and say, Danielle, what's your address? I'm just going to send you something. And he would get their address, and right from that phone call would put his book with a little personal note in a FedEx envelope, knowing that they'd get it the next day. He would schedule a follow-up call 3 or 4 days later. But consistently, what's happened is people receive his book the next day with a handwritten note. They go, oh my. They, of course, start reading it. By the time that he does the follow-up call, people are like, yeah, listen, I was reading your book, read the first 6 chapters, love it. How do we get started? And so he said, where a lot of people were like, well, how much does it cost to ship a book? He said, it might cost me $50 with the book cost and FedEx. But he said, I get from that a $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 consulting engagement. And he's like, I don't even have to compete anymore. The book is the winning ticket for him out competing the other people in this space and getting the business. And I think his responsiveness to get it right in the FedEx envelope and get it that day and wow them, I think it's just one of the best examples of where somebody uses their book, not only as great content, but as a great sales tool.
I love that. I love that you called it the golden ticket too, because I mean, you're totally right. And I mean, I'm thinking about how, when I was younger, I heard people saying things like, make sure you're sending holiday cards to, your clients, all that. But a book, a lot better than that kind of technique. I like that a lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So hey, that's a tip to all of our listeners out there. Get that book written and get enough copies and envelopes and packaging, and just make part of your routine. Head into the post office, right? I mean,
that's right. Yeah, he happened to have a FedEx depot that's only about 6 blocks from his house, so I think that helped too.
Yeah, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, I'd have to schedule that out like each morning, like my morning routine. But
Right.
You make it happen and you make it work. I like that a lot. But hey, let's dive into a little bit more about you and your books and everything. I was looking at some of your website, and I actually watched this video you have. It's under MCP Talent, actually.
Right.
And in this video, you were talking a lot about business relationships. And customer service and all of that. And you started off by making a comparison about dating to businesses. So I just thought maybe that could be an interesting segue into another topic and a little bit more about your work and your theories. So
yeah,
tell us a little bit more about that talk and about how does business relate to dating.
Totally. One of my themes, or something I'm really passionate about, and it's sort of a big category in our book, business is people. Now that'll make sense because everybody's like, oh yeah, I get it. People are in business, sure. But I really started to look at the dynamics of how people are just treated in business, right? And I had to try and find a way to be able to say, like, the way you're treating customers or prospects, let's compare that to another situation where you were really hoping for success. And for most people, it was some form of dating, where they could relate to, as a guy, where it was like doing the romancing, where you're going and getting flowers and setting dinner reservations, and you're thinking, like, what else could I do for her? And I'm going to send her a little note, and you're being romantic. And it was so impacting, right? It's like, and I've talked to guys where they've said, oh yeah, I did such a good job of winning my wife, right? I convinced my girlfriend to become my wife because I did such a good job and I put in so much effort. And I realized that so often in business, people don't think of it the same way. Like, I want to keep the relationship fresh. I want to keep it exciting. I want to keep it interesting. I'm trying to attract and engage prospective clients. And so I just talk a lot in that video, but as a theme, about how many times do we take the approach of we're sort of apathetic towards prospective customers. And once you become customers, then you're kind of like the old spouse, where it's like, well, we live together, like, we're not going anywhere, and it starts to become a little routine and boring. And I said, what if in business you took the approach of we're going to just continue dating our prospects, trying to make them feel special and do some wow things and be romantic, engaging, and thoughtful. And then we carried that over to be customers. And I really found that with businesses who take that sort of approach of, business is like dating, that they win more customers because they put so much effort in beyond just like, well, send your proposal, or I've responded to your email. When it's that element of, I got a handwritten thank you card, and then we got this, and then this got FedEx to us, and then there was a surprise. Maybe your book showed up unexpectedly. And then there was, and you start to see, like, there's all sorts of little areas that you can make that happen. And I just go back to one of my favorite examples is the DoubleTree hotels, where when you check in, they provide you with the warm chocolate chip cookie. Cookie costs about $1.10 maybe to make, maybe it's still $1.99. And yet somebody's making a buying decision to pick that hotel at $400 or $500 a night because of the little nuance. They don't have to have a little oven behind the front desk, but they do. And so there's little steps like that. They're romancing the customer when they check in. And I like that, okay, once they become a customer, how do we keep them engaged and knowing they're valuable? And there's so many things you can do if you suddenly take that approach of, oh yeah, they're not just a customer. There's just somebody who I'm dating, and I just want them to feel appreciated and engaged all the time. what does that look like? And typically all those things are outside of your core product or service. So if you're a plumber, it's not your plumbing service, it's something outside of that. If it's a physical product, it's probably not the product. It's something, it's all the extras, all the special things around that that make it an interesting relationship going forward.
So, three things that came up as you were talking to me about this. The first thing is, I really want a chocolate chip cookie now. Secondly, the funny thing is also, it reminds me there was this commercial out not too long ago. I think it was for a phone company, and maybe you know what I'm talking about, where like the customers are talking to the sales rep, and like the new customer is getting like, oh, like this many deals, and the old customer comes in like, hey, I have a broken phone, and they're like, you know, go wait in line.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's the kind of deal, right? You know, like you need to keep, you know, touching up with your clients, your customers, whoever they are, because otherwise they're gonna just kind of forget about you. I mean, I get dentists who send me like birthday cards sometimes and stuff like that. So like same deal, you know, like sending a copy of her book, keeping in touch, same deal. But
as long as just like dating, it's really personal. And so you bring up the idea of birthday cards. And I used to have an insurance guy, and he basically had a rubber stamp with his signature, and he just stamped cards. In fact, I'm sure he didn't do it. Somebody's in his office did. But when I started to get it, and I realized like he didn't even sign it. It's just stamped. And now, in fact, it becomes impersonal, and it's actually damaging to the brand or to that relationship, right? So I always say, like, again, coming back to dating, would you send her a card where you just stamped your name in it? Probably not, right? She probably wouldn't look very favorably about that. Or neither would he if it was reversed, right? She sends you a card and you're like, did she just stamp her name in this? Right? So as long as the things you're doing, you're thinking about it from the perspective of a relationship, and like, okay, what would be personal? What would he or she or they, if it's a management team, what would they appreciate? You know, in the past, we had, for my marketing agency, we had custom made donuts. And because we were like, well, we're going to bring them into the management team. Why don't we get donuts? And so we had a custom made fancy donut with our logo put on it. And we would show up with a dozen donuts. And they were blown away by the fact that they were custom. They were delicious. There was some that everybody could share in. It was consumable, right? Everybody's enjoying the sugar and like, oh my God, these taste great. But it was just something, right? And it was something that we stood out, but it was about, hey, we want to have fun with this. You guys are important to us. Here, we brought you a little gift. So all of the connotation, the messages around it played into, you know, really how often we won business. And you know, in the response for proposals, the RFPs and the quotations and estimates, at no point did it say, you know, anything about donuts. That was something we went, well, outside of our actual marketing services, let's start showing up with donuts and show them who we are and how we want to approach the relationship.
Yeah, I like that a lot, you know, and one thing that I also wanted to touch upon, though, you know, you mentioned like if it's too impersonal, that'll turn them away. That's actually what I was going to challenge you with, because, you know, nowadays, especially in relationships, you know, if you come on too strong to somebody, they're going to be like, you know, like, get away from me. Why are you sending me so many flowers? What would you say to the person who maybe is sending too many love letters to their potential clients? I mean, what would you say to them?
Danielle, that's a fantastic point, right? That if you were the person who's sending flowers every day, you quickly go from romantic to creepy, right? So
imagining also if it's like too personalized, it's like, hey, like I know your favorite toothpaste is mint.
Right. I think that there's a threshold there. Although I know that I found that making it personal enough where I could go find the information, sometimes being able to share it, like, hey, I saw on Instagram that you're really into cars. So, right. So there's some public ways to gather information about people that aren't too much. I know that sometimes people are like, well, I don't really do handwritten cards. And I'm like, okay, well then, if you're going to send a text message, that's fine. But, you know, you could send a text message that really is heartfelt or sincere. And people still, regardless of the medium, pick up on how sincere and honest or transparent your approach is, right? We all know when somebody's not being authentic. And I think no matter what the medium is, we certainly see it in our marketing that people won't respond to an email, but they'll respond to a text message. So our methods of communication have changed. Nobody's going to pick up the telephone. So we're like, okay, well, you can't phone and leave a message necessarily. So if we were going to send a text, what would the text say that would be, right? So how do we structure that so that they feel like it's the same thing? If I was dating, what kind of text message would I send? We of course keep it clean because, I'm not sexting. There's a business relationship.
Don't text your clients. No.
Right, exactly, right? Just so that that's clear. But again, we're trying to have fun with it, trying to engage, trying to just to be appreciative. Hey, really, thank you for the meeting. I absolutely enjoyed meeting with you, right? If it was over this Zoom, whatever. But there's something where now you're approaching it like a relationship where you're like, if you had a great time on a date, would you text afterwards and say, I absolutely had a great time on this date? Probably. So do that, right? It's small steps like that we want people to get back to that make for good business too.
Yeah, and this directly relates, I'm circling right back around to book writing now because, for example, the way that you craft that message, the way that you decide, okay, email or text, that's all writing, that has to do with, your audience, who's going to resonate with it. And that's something you probably had to do when you wrote your book, thinking about who's going to pick this up, who am I talking to, what are their pain points, how am I going to solve their pain points, and all of that kind of goes into a book, just like it would with your follow-up to your client. In a way, your book is follow-up to them, and the example that you said. So,
by the way, when I wrote my book, I also did that. I literally thought of a young woman.
That's where I was going with that. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Named Carrie. She had a department store, and she was very capable, and yet struggled like most entrepreneurs with feeling confident, thinking, am I doing the right thing here? Like, this seems like a disaster. And I was like, no, this is business. It's just so many moving pieces. You're doing everything right. And I thought, okay, what are the messages that I'd want to give Carrie or anybody who is really running a good business and second guessing themselves? And so that's why mindset is a big piece of the business too. But I literally thought about, like, how would I word this? How would I say this to Carrie? And she, to this day, I don't know that she knows that I'm the person that I was writing all this to. But yeah, literally, I had her as sort of the ideal client profile to be like, okay, this is who we're trying to get the message to. And that was really, really helpful. I used it all the time to read it back a second time after writing it and be like, is this how I'd say it to Carrie? Is this what she'd need to hear? And so it was great to have that sort of person who would represent my audience.
Well, first off, it's really funny that she doesn't know that it was her, because funny enough, I feel like it's almost like, a little romance in itself. Like, Carrie, where are you? My long lost client who wrote my book.
Right.
But it's great that you're able to think of that client and what are their needs? How am I going to address it to them? Let me package it into a book, because at the end of the day, that's, the whole point of having your book is, being able to talk about the services you could provide. So.
Totally. And really thinking of her, that I thought if she read this book and it really helped her, this would all make the writing, the hours spent, worthwhile. And then hoping that there was, 100,000 Carries out there.
Yeah, and I like what you just said with, like, hoping that hour spent was worthwhile, because that's, another factor I always tell my clients too. I'm like, your person who's reading your book is somebody who's just as busy as you are. Why would they spend an hour reading your book when, they could be earning like, $100 an hour by charging a client to come to them? You know what I mean? So like, it's the ROI kind of aspect of it. What is the value behind what you're going to say? You have to make sure it's important. For you, all 99 pieces of your evidence, gave them something to learn. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And kind of circling back to the mindset aspect that you mentioned before, that is something that you mentioned in your book, and that's something that relates to book writing as well. So tell us a little more about that. I know you said Carrie, there's a whole thing with her, but how does mindset really make or break a business? Would you agree that it could be detrimental?
Absolutely. Yeah. And some of it starts with, like, if you wake up every morning as an entrepreneur, do you feel like you're going to go in and you're winning or you're losing? And some people get into self-talk where it's like, I'm just losing all the time. And they're not necessarily losing, because running a business, no matter what industry you're in, is challenging, right? There are so many moving parts, from your sales to the marketing to finance to administration, operations. I mean, there's different variables. And then there's things outside of your business, like the environment, the economy, that all can be having a huge impact. And so it's such a difficult thing to navigate to begin with. And so, but if you go into it with the self-talk that's negative, you have to really go into it and be focused on, okay, what are we doing right? Where am I winning? What have I done that's been, almost like counting your wins? And I found that people, if they are in that they have to be able to understand staying positive, being able to stay focused on sort of the vision that they originally had, because by year 2, you can't even remember why you thought getting into a business was a good idea, right? So, but coming back to mindset, to be able to reset it all the time. And I find having a vision of where you want to take things is a great way to ground yourself and be able to get back to, what was I trying to create? Oh yeah, right. And even for that day or for that week, it can bring you back to, right, I'm back on track. I remember where I'm going. I've got my navigation back. And, one of the things I talk about in mindset is just persistence. It's been the number one thing in terms of not knowing if I'm doing things right or wrong, because you don't always know when you're doing it. You're hoping, and then you find out as a result that, yep, I was doing it right. It's worked. But that really the key in a lot of ways is just, I'm going to persist. I'm going to persist. I'll adapt to what the feedback I'm getting. But persistence is the number one thing. And if people keep the mindset of just, no matter what, I'm going to persist, that it has been the most effective thing for me and for most longtime entrepreneurs. They say sort of just time in the game has been one of their biggest factors to winning. And so all of that sort of gets rolled under, a lot of little chapters I have around mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I can see how you can kind of branch off of that same theory for a bunch of different of the 99 altogether that you have.
Right.
Because it's so important, and it's a big umbrella that affects many different aspects of what you're doing day to day.
Totally. And people get up in the morning and they forget everything they've built today. At some point, it was an idea first. Like before they launch the business, they get an idea for the business. Before they hire people, they start to think about it. And so the creation of your business really is just in your mind first. Every different aspect to it, you start to roll around in your mind. You get an idea of how you maybe want your logo to look and how you want this in the website. And then you start to actually move those things into form and create them in a concrete way. But I say, listen, everything about the business in the future, you have the ability to create in your mind right now. So how do you want it to look? Let's work on the ideal. And I think when people start to be like, oh yeah, I guess I did think of all this stuff before I started to create it. And they get that connection that, okay, going forward, let's work on the ideal mental picture. And that should create a better outcome for us. And that's something I spend a lot of time with clients and stuff, reminding them of that. Let's keep building the ideal picture. We'll have to adapt to the market, to the environment, to the economy, everything around us. But let's just stay focused on that ideal picture. And if we do that, we're going to have a lot of success in creating that long term.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to the whole idea of visualization in a way, right? I hear that buzzword a lot these days. You picture where you want to be, plan the steps to get there.
Without visualizing and sitting on the couch home. Right? You visualize the business, and then it's great. Now it's 9:00. We got to go to work.
Yeah. So, visualizing, but also taking action too.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
Definitely. And I guess that kind of circles back to the beginning of this conversation, right? I mean, so all of our listeners out there, you have two choices tonight, right? You can stop listening to our podcast and, turn on Love Island or something, or, sit down at your computer and start just writing chapter 1. What's going to give you the better benefit later on down the road? I mean, listening to Marty, I think the clear answer is just get on there and just put a few ideas down on the paper. And I mean,
one of the things you said was use the word the rewarding. And I would have to say that to anybody who's thinking about writing or has just started, that getting to the completion of it, it's such a rewarding experience that in itself is worth in a lot of ways doing the work. Right? It's even better when people start to be like, oh my God, I read your book and I'm really enjoying this, or this has been so helpful. You get that feedback, even if it's on Amazon, somebody leaves a great review, it feels great. But just the reward of going through it and completing it as a personal project, I think I can't imagine anybody who went on the journey wouldn't come out the other end and be like, yeah, this was absolutely something I'm glad I did.
Yeah, of course. There's just so many reasons why. I mean, aside from, having your own business card to having something to show clients, but also just the legacy factor, having your ideas out there for years to come, that personal satisfaction, like you just said too. I mean, it's endless, to be honest. Yep. And I get it. It's rewarding.
Totally.
My follow-up question to you on that then, I mean, you said you were so excited. How did you celebrate when you finally finished? I'm just kind of curious. Everyone has their own little I finished a chapter, here's what I'm going to do.
That is a great question. So I still have here in my office, I have the original manuscript because I finished it and I printed it all out. And so I have it with a big, there's marks on it. And I think in my mind, at some point, it could be worth something. But I mean, I celebrated. I know I celebrated. I had a glass of champagne with my wife when it was published. Um, she wrote me a great card and gave me a little plant, which I still have alive. So I'm
Oh,
doing a pretty good job with my green thumb. I think that was about it. I mean, there wasn't anything, like I didn't necessarily celebrate it publicly, but it was just privately. It was that satisfaction. And I know we did open a bottle of champagne, which was a nice thing. And then I sent my editor a nice bottle of scotch.
there you go. Yeah, I mean, just like a little something to be like, you know what, I did this, milestone complete,
Yeah,
and on to the next stage. So,
yeah,
yeah, it's always,
yeah.
it's something to put value into and recognize, when you achieve something. I always say that to my clients. I'm like, okay, like, what did you do today? You wrote a couple paragraphs. Great, like, pat on the back,
Right.
you did something, you made some progress. So it's always good to,
Totally.
recognize that,
I
especially
do
in a
love,
business world.
if I was going to do that again, I think I'd do it like that. Every chapter that I completed, I have a little mini reward, right? Just
You
to
know,
keep me really motivated. I think that would work too.
I once had this one client and she was just like the worst with like staying on track. So you know what she literally did? She took M&Ms and she put like a little line out in front of her computer, and every time she finished a page, she took like a little snack. I mean, you got to
Great.
do what you got to
You
do
got to
just to
do
keep yourself
exactly,
writing.
exactly.
Just really funny. But yeah, I mean, considering all this stuff, you wrote your book, you're out there, you're still, extremely successful. Marty, what's next for you? What's next on the radar?
I've got two other book ideas,
No
and I'm
book idea.
contemplating doing that. But funny enough, when you stop writing and then you get out of the habit to dive back in, even as a second-time writer, I'm like, feels a little daunting. So I'm going through the same process. I'm like, okay, well, let's start to map those out. So
How many
I've
post-it notes do you have this time?
I have a whole folder of notes and stuff that I need to sort through to get that all mapped. And then, from a business standpoint, I divested of most of the businesses I was in when my boys were born. It was easier to be like, okay, I can't be running multiple companies and be a dad with little kids. Now my boys are a little older. And so I'm actually looking at setting up a capital company. And so where I can start to buy other companies and we'll buy, hold, and grow those businesses. So I'm excited about that as an entrepreneur. And my company, Evolve Business Group, we continue to expand that. And that's been really exciting, just bringing on more and more clients from across North America, Dubai, the UK. We've got clients all over. And it's great to help people that are just scaling their business. So I'm still, after all these years, passionate about that part of that business and the function we provide.
I love that. Like you don't stop. There's always something next. Somebody new asking that question to you would have at least like three answers, and there you
Something.
go. But I mean, what I'm gonna ask next? I'm curious about those books. Like what are those ideas that you have on your mind right now? Are they secret? Are they still brewing a little bit? Something you want to share, or what do you think?
I don't want to share it because I gave the titles away, you'd immediately know. So I feel like that jinxing it at this point.
Understood. Well, hey, I
They're
mean,
still in
like,
the business entrepreneur space. Let me put it that way.
okay,
Yeah.
good. So something,
I'm not
all our listeners can be on the lookout for because it's something they will benefit from.
right.
So,
I'm not moving into romance novels anytime soon. I don't
oh,
think
are you
that's
sure about that? You seem to
yeah,
be the dating expert with
maybe.
your
Yeah, yeah. I
I turn it into a romance novel, right? But no, if you ever need someone to take a look at all those notes and help you even just like put it into some sort of semblance, I mean, here at Authors, we have like services tailored to anybody who might
right.
need something. I mean, even myself, I do angel writing, editing, marketing, publishing. So,
I
it's not
appreciate
just
that.
me either. We got a whole team. We've helped so many people. So, maybe it's something if you
I
ever
I
want to,
appre- I
send me
appreciate
those post-it notes my way.
right.
But yeah, I mean, other than that, as we start to wrap up today, Marty, what is one piece of advice that we can sort of leave our listeners off with today? Like you
Yeah.
have a lot of tips. What should they kind of keep in their minds as we
So
close?
as a writer, I mean, I probably echo what you say all the time, which is, get started. Right, get going. Like there's no better day than today to put it on a post-it note, to write it down in a notebook, to jot something on your phone and as a note on your phone. But just get started. And I think as an entrepreneur, what I say most often to people is keep going. Just being diligent and persistent, and enjoy the ride, but keep going. Like make it fun and you'll come out the other end. You'll be successful. It doesn't necessarily mean you'll be the next billionaire, but there's a lot of great success in entrepreneurship that isn't just, a massive bank account. The journey itself is really rewarding in terms of how it forces you to grow as an individual. I think entrepreneurship forces people to grow like nothing else.
Definitely. And no matter what you're doing, I mean, literally right now, if you're listening to this and you're driving in your car, then as soon as you finish this, just ask Carrie to start typing up some notes for you. You know what I mean? Like whatever it is, just get out there. I was once talking to this girl, and when you mentioned Dubai, which is why like this story is popping up. I was in Dubai, and we were on one of those like dune buggies going through the desert, right?
Cool.
And somebody else was on the excursion with me. She's like, I have this book idea, and she's like, you do writing, blah blah blah. I'm like, open up your notes right now. Why not? Like, we're in a car. It's nice and cozy. So she literally starts typing it there. So it's like, wherever you are, just start putting your paper marks on the paper.
Totally.
So yeah, great way to end it off today, Marty. I mean, all in all, everybody, I think we've learned a lot from Marty today. His experiences, his passion for entrepreneurship, his commitment to helping others succeed. It really shines through in all of your answers today. I mean, so thank you so much for sharing that with us. My pleasure. From going from just a 21-year-old business owner to an internationally recognized coach, I mean, you've made a huge transition in your life, and I think that's something that all of our listeners can be inspired by. So everybody listening, you can find out more about Marty's insights by his book, Tiger by the Tail. Do you happen to have a copy you can show everybody right now?
Well, I have here, there's a copy of the, so
right
it's got a Tiger by the Tail.
Maybe our editors
99
can
Secrets to
zoom
Tame
in on
and
that
Master
guy
Your
or
Business.
something.
Yes. That's what I've got a stack of them in the other room, but that's what it's available on Amazon and Audible, and I actually do it myself on Audible. I read it, and or you can go to martypark.com. All the information about me and about the book is there as well. Perfect.
Yeah, so you heard it right here. I mean, go to martypark.com. And if you like the sound of Marty's voice on this podcast, then check out his audiobook too, because he reads the whole thing out. Other than that, if you feel inspired today and you want to follow in Marty's footsteps, but you don't quite have the time to write it yourself, or you have a bunch of jumbled notes and you don't know what to do, the next step, Authors on Mission is here to help, because we have services tailored to whatever stage you're into. So whether you're looking for business advice from Marty or some writing advice from us here on Authors on Mission, we're here to help. So take that step, get out there, right?
Absolutely, yeah. You're absolutely right. Do it.
All right. With that, Marty, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been Danielle, a true pleasure.
Thanks for having me. It's been really great to chat with you.
Awesome, yeah. And to all of our listeners, keep writing, keep inspiring, keep leading, and have a great night. Thank you.
As we close another inspiring episode, remember, every best-selling author was once just a person with a story to tell. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, inviting you to write the next chapter of your success story at authorsonmission.com. Your audience is waiting, your wisdom is ready, and your book is next.